Welcome to a new episode of Bridging the Gap. Today is our back to school podcast episode. Since today we'll be talking all things high school sports, high school recruiting, high school NIL, which I didn't know if I was going to say that ever, but here we are. Can't think of anyone better to join than Kristy Belden. Kristy is the Associate Athletic Director and Student Athlete College Counselor at Bishop Moore Catholic High School in Florida, player development expert both on the high school side, previously on the collegiate side. So we'll learn a lot today. So Kristy, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christian. Appreciate the opportunity and always looking forward to talking about college and high school athletics and where things are evolving.
Yeah, really excited. I think this is our first high school. I think we've had some episodes that touched on high school and how things are going or youth sports in general, but the first one like really with someone that is working in this space. Yeah, and is doing a lot on there as well. Before we dive in, you were a track and field athlete in college. What was for those of you who don't know, what was your discipline or disciplines, I guess?
Yeah, I ran track at St. John's University in New York, the Big East, and I was a sprinter. So 100, 200 relay,
Nice.
back in the day. And then from there, I obviously, kind of started my career in athletics, working in college athletics, and was there for, I guess, about 15 years, and then transitioned over to the high school space.
Awesome. And I know we'll touch a lot on kind of that path to what was your favorite? You just said a couple different. Is it the shorter distances or the sprinting for a
Yeah,
longer
the,
time?
the 200 was my best.
Okay.
So,
Nice. Nice,
yeah.
nice, nice. Um, that's good. Yeah. I was never fast enough. I had to do the 400 a lot in high school, and I do not look fondly back upon the last 100 meters of a 400-meter sprint is not
Agreed.
super enjoyable
No,
usually.
yeah, no, I would get sick after every 400. So yes, it was not my favorite as well.
Yeah. Well, at least we're
I
on the
think
same
the
page
400 is
there.
kind of universally hated.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Kudos to those that do that for a living or for their sport. You mentioned it a bit in a kind of the path about you, and maybe you can share with the folks who don't know you that well a bit more too. But kind of a reverse path of some things we see sometimes with people, right? Like some people work in youth and then they maybe work in college. You kind of went from college football, power conference football to working at a high school program. Can you take us maybe a bit through just a bit of your background, but then also like kind of what triggered maybe making that change for you as well?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think my background is obviously a little bit unique, especially being a female, working in, male-dominated sports, at least initially. Having been an Olympic sport student athlete, I recognized very, very early in my time that, I needed to use my athleticism and my opportunity to basically kind of set me up for the rest of what life was going to be. So even as a student athlete, I knew I wanted to work in sport in some fashion, but didn't really know. I went from, I'm like, do I want to work on like the business side? Do I want to, I toyed with being like an athletic trainer, physical therapist, and then ultimately I graduated with a degree in psychology, and then I went to Florida State where I got my master's in sports psychology. And again, at the time, I originally thought, oh, I'm going to be a sports psychologist, and I thought I was going to, work on the PGA Tour with, golfers and elite athletes. But fortunately, I had a graduate assistantship in student athlete academic support, and really just fell in love with, just the relationships and the dynamic and helping these student athletes grow, and enjoy their experiences off the field. So then I worked, like I said, I finished up my master's and worked at UCF where I was student athlete development, and transitions, specifically with our football program. So it was, leadership development, community service, the academic side, discipline and really helping these, men prepare for their time after college football and making sure, because, as you know, so as so many of them go into the college thinking that they're going to have the opportunity to play professional sport, the numbers obviously are very low. So making sure that their experiences as a collegiate student athlete, we're really preparing them beyond, whether it's, as an employee, whether it's as a husband, as a father, a community member, and making sure that, as I said earlier, that their experiences were setting them up for life.
Yeah, great. And then when you were thinking around, you worked there, was it like a conscious decision to go into high school, or was it just like the right opportunity and you kind of like fell into that, or how did that
Yeah,
kind of come
no,
about?
it was a little bit of both.
Okay.
As during my time as, working in, like I said, male dominated industry, I mean, college football is a 24/7 gig. Just the pressure obviously to win is immense, and everybody within the program is feeling that. But during that time, I became a mom, and my priorities shifted. So we went through, as often happens, went through a coaching change. And I just said, you know what? This is I think my time is done. My conscience was clear. I felt like I had done all I could do within that, particular program. I wasn't willing, to relocate. It wasn't something, we weren't going to pack up our family and move. So, for me, high school was, an opportunity where I felt like I could still make an impact. And ironically, the program that we've built here is modeled after a college student athlete support program. So everything that we are doing here is literally, I'm doing the almost the exact same job that I was doing at the college space. Because college, high school athletics have evolved so tremendously. The pressures and the parental expectations of the services that we provide in, preparing these young people for the next level. So it really was a seamless transition. And I think our families here have benefited from that. And they understand that not only have many of our coaches been college student athletes themselves and or coached at a high level, we all kind of know what it takes to get there, and we're speaking the same language. So our student athletes that want to get there, they know, okay, we've literally walked the walk and talked the talk.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's interesting to hear that like that is such a smooth transition now. I feel like most people, yeah, I guess looking at it for the first time would think like a high school is operating completely different, right? But I know athletics is obviously a big part of Bishop Moore and why people go and all that, right? Is that a
For sure. For
just
sure.
kind of that expectation
Yeah, and
too?
it's funny because how many, like when college coaches, come on campus, it's so funny that how many of them are, already thinking down the pike that, hey, I'm going to work in college athletics for this many years. And then ultimately they see themselves coming down to the high school space.
It's
So it's
interesting.
just really kind of the transition. I mean, and I think part of that is too is, I never wanted to work in pro sports. For me, like I said, I wanted to have the personal relationships and to be able to have an impact on these young people.
Yeah.
And at the time, that was college sports. But kind of as we've seen, for better or for worse, college athletics more closely resembles the pros
Yeah.
than it does, amateur sport these days. So for me, kind of high school right now is like the last level of where I, can truly have an impact and
Yeah.
help, develop these young men and women.
Makes a lot of sense. As you're working at, you started out in college, right? So like what are some beliefs that you maybe had working at UCF and football that then when you really dove into the high school space, you maybe had to kind of rethink a little bit around like player development, educating young players. Like what are some things that you had to kind of revise, update, change a little bit then you when you went kind of to that high school stage?
Honestly, I think it was the preparedness, and seeing the amount of student athletes at the college level that obviously their athleticism, got them there. But seeing how underprepared they were for, not only for college work, but for life. Not having a bank account, you know what I mean? Just basic life skills, roommate issues and being able to, speak with an adult and have an adult conversation. So very, very basic life skills. So I think here in particular, we obviously do a lot with, leadership development and things along those lines, and really trying to, have these young people think outside the box and truly think beyond their sport. Their sport is something they do, not who they are. And that's only one piece of a very big puzzle.
It's a bit of a theme, I think, over some of these interviews that I've done where I coached in college too, like you worked in the college space or others. A lot of times when I talk to coaches around like what you wish you would have had with these athletes. And a lot of them are like, I wish I would have had them when they were in high school.
Hmm.
Just that preparedness factor. So the fact that it is starting earlier now with actual like programming outside of just like the parenting and stuff is great to hear because I feel like that's once you're in college you're kind of not that you can't evolve but you're somewhat set a little bit on in some of your ways too um,
Right, for sure.
that are part of that. What are some things beyond that? Like, I don't know if it's a specific like time, day, moment when you were working at UCF that shaped how you work with these athletes now. I know you work very specifically with football, so I
Hmm.
don't know how exactly that translates into every high school sport, but what are some of those things that you think about that here are the two, three things that really shaped how I now work with these 16, 17, 15-year olds that I'm engaging with?
I think it's just, as you can imagine, I think especially in college football and so often you have people that are, you know, again, their athleticism is potentially what got them, in the rivals, the stars, oh, I'm a 5 star, oh, I'm this, I can catch the ball, I can run fast, I can do all of these things. But in particular, there were a whole lot of other things that are necessary to be successful that were lacking. And so I think for me, it's how do we make sure that these people are well-rounded and really kind of help keep it in perspective. Also understanding that, a lot of these student athletes, sometimes the pressure is coming from other sources. It's coming from whether it's coaches that are, hey, I'm going to get this guy, this kid to the next level. I'm going to, family members that are expecting them to go pro, expecting them, hey, when you make it big, you're going to take care of me. So it's really, like I said, being intentional with these conversations that and understanding that these young people often have a lot of pressure, right? Even when we're talking, some of our Olympic sports and things like that, we have parents that are basically saying, like, I'm putting Susie into whatever the sport, volleyball, soccer, tennis lessons, swim lessons, whatever the thing is, because I want her to have a scholarship. And that's why I'm willing to pay thousands and thousands of dollars for the trainers, right? That's why I'm willing to pay for all these things to hopefully get them that college scholarship, which that puts pressure on these young people, right? To excel and to do these things. So I think it's important to kind of keep that in mind that what is the motivation? Now at the high school level, what is interesting is we're kind of expected for the families to meet all the needs. And it was funny, I was talking with one of our coaches just this morning, this exact conversation, that we have student athletes that are on these rosters that are high levels, and they will be. They're going to be the D1 kids, full scholarships, the NIL deals, all the things. And then we also have kids on our rosters that they just want to be a part of something. They maybe have very little experience in the sport, but they want to do something, or they were on one of our teams for 4 years. And so how do we make that the best opportunity as well and meet both families' needs? Because one is expecting them, hey, what are we doing to get their kid, out in front of all these coaches and the best opportunities? But yet this other one, they're just happy to be there and we want them to have a great experience too. And we don't necessarily want them to sit on the bench all season.
Yeah.
So I think probably the biggest lesson is just to realize that sometimes these kids are underprepared in the grand scheme of life lessons, but B, they're carrying a lot of pressures and a lot of expectations that has nothing to do with their own dreams and what they're trying to accomplish. And I think just being conscious of that, if that makes sense.
No, it's a great, yeah. I've never heard it framed exactly that way, but it makes so much sense to just think about, because I think we think about it maybe in college and in pro sports and like, but I don't know, high school sports, maybe a lot of us look back at our own experience and don't quite have not
Yeah. Well,
updated that view of how it was 10,
right.
15, however many
For
years ago,
sure.
of what it
Absolutely. And
looked
I
like.
and I said that when we had our coaches retreat, last week to kick off the year. I mean, and that's what had to remind our coach. I said, raise your hands if you were a college athlete. And I would say 90% of our coaches were college athletes and played at a high level. And the unfortunate comment that I had to say to them was, the world that we all played in, that world no longer exists. It's not for better, it's not for worse. It's just different. And we need to understand that. And we need to understand, the expectations and the media and the ticker on Twitter and the commitment games and the agents and all NIL and all these things, that this thing is changing fast and furious.
Yeah.
So we've got to, stay abreast and ultimately have the best interest of the student athlete at heart, because there are so many outside sources that don't, and that are negative, looking to, make money off these kids, or looking, ulterior
Yeah,
motives.
for sure. Um, I, I'm trying to rephrase this question a little bit. Athletes that do make it to a college level, right? Whether it's D1 or something like those that you worked with at the UCF, where from an outside looking in, people would be like, oh, they made it to where they wanted to go, right? And we all know that that's not always necessarily true or whatever that is. But now you're having more of the conversation with the kids and the parents that are still like, this is where I want to get to. Is it a different conversation to have around just development with someone who's there versus someone that's still going there? Or how
Yeah.
did you
Oh, it's for
approach that,
sure.
or do
Yeah.
you
I mean,
approach
I
that?
would say, yeah, no, I would say it's for sure a different conversation. And I try to be as intentional, and try to give as much of a reality. College recruiting and navigating this it's honestly, it's my passion project. So I try to do as many, conversations, like this, and get the word out, and really help people understand the reality of where things are at. And also, even in just the last 5 years, I think people need to understand that college admissions has gotten ridiculously competitive. Legacy admissions are no longer a thing, the test scores and the competitiveness to get in. And then also college athletics has absolutely evolved, and continues to. And then when you throw in, the legal system and political action and all of these things, it's just changing so fast, that I think people need to understand that. I mean, even through not even 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, if your son or daughter maybe would have been, a Division I prospect, the reality of it is, in 2026, 2027, now they might be D2. The D, everyone's kind of moved down a peg. I think when you look at our Olympic sports, as a whole in particular, the vast level of the power athletes are Olympians, right? And even if they're not United States Olympians, they're likely on someone's Olympic team and or in their, Olympic development program, and in hopes that they will be someday, even some of the smallest little countries. And then obviously, the footballs and basketballs are a whole other, avenue. So everyone's kind of moved down a little bit, and that's not a knock, but it's just understanding that, not everyone can necessarily get into X school and or play at X school. So it might be a different path, different path. Then obviously you throw the transfer portal in, and that's a whole other, dynamic that, especially young men, 17 years old, they might not be fully developed. Not may not, they are not fully developed, right? Females are obviously gonna have a different path, with that, based on their development and where they fit in the grand scheme of things. So it's being open-minded that, unfortunately or unfortunately, where they commit to out of high school may not be where they ultimately graduate from, and or, the ability to go and get a master's from somewhere. And now with, up to 5 years to play, I would hope that every student athlete is getting leaving with a master's degree.
Yeah. That change, yeah, you have a lot more of these conversations than I have, but I think the change of the school that you want to end up playing at may not be the school that you're starting your college career on. I think it's such a big change now, with at least in like the conversations I still have with some parents that are like, yeah, it's just different, like if you want to be at a Power 4 level, if that's like your goal for your whole life, unless you're really like a blue chip, like no brainer athlete, which, just by
For
definition,
sure. Oh,
most people
yeah,
are not.
for
Like
sure.
you have to kind of decide, right? Is that the school you want to go to and maybe not play sports? Or are you okay with going to like a smaller school and then and in 2, 3 years kind of getting there, but you don't know. I feel like
Right.
you only have like one college career. So I remember having some conversations with an athlete that I was helping with where they wanted to go to this one school, but she was not at the level to play there. And then it's
Hmm.
just like, I've always wanted to go here, but I
Yeah.
also don't want to stop playing,
For
tennis in
sure.
this case.
Right. I mean, yeah, I mean, and
And
that's
it's
the
a tough
reality. And like
decision
that,
too.
yeah, I mean, and that's like I said, what I, tell our families more than ever, it's about finding the right fit, right? The right fit. And like I said, if your son or daughter's sport were to come off the plate because A, they're not able to play at that level, right? Or something get injured or they get cut or their program gets, eliminated or whatever thing. If their sport comes off the plate, would you still choose that school? And
Yeah.
if the answer is no, then you probably need to keep looking.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, not that I encourage anyone to think this way, but they do have to kind of keep it in the back of the mind. When you're committing, are you committing to the school for 4 years, committing to the school for now? And then again, I have to, tell them that these if even if they are getting, athletic scholarship dollars, it's a 1 year. So for any reason, they can get cut, they can get whatever. So they do have to protect themselves and keep that in mind. And realize, like I said, in many cases, the reality of it is, their athleticism, if they have at least, or at most 5 years left to play beyond high school, you want that to be a good experience, right? You want that to have been worth something beyond just times and statistics,
Yeah,
right? What else did you gain from this experience?
for sure. You mentioned parents a good amount already, so it's a good segue on it. Obviously, parents are involved in college sports, but obviously in the high school level, it's a much bigger presence. How do you navigate like those conversations with parents who are obviously the parents, the guardians of these athletes? You might also have individual conversations with the athlete. Like, how do you navigate just having those conversations with them, the two groups, right?
Right,
The parents and the athlete, especially when it comes to like their sport and recruiting and like those
right.
subjects that I know can also get emotional in some cases too.
Right. Oh, for sure. And I think, like I said, I mean, I think we have these conversations, and I think again, I am, anyone who knows me will tell you, I am a very honest person. I am probably too honest, and brutally honest. But again, like my conscience is clear because I know I provided you every bit of knowledge, every bit of, hey, did you consider this? Or what I maybe you should look at this, and to really try to, have the difficult conversations, leading it with love, of course, but being able to say, hey, this may not be the level, or what about this? What should we look at a different level? And really trying to make them understand that, the recruiting market is what it is. If your times, if your stats, if your size, is only if you're getting interest from a certain level of school, that's probably the level that you're at. Now, are there exceptions? Absolutely. But for the most part, it's just like when you go to sell your house, right? The market is going to dictate the price. It's the same thing in recruiting. The interest that you're getting is the level that you are likely at. So it's trying to walk the conversation with them. And I hope our parents pick up on too. I'm very intentional in the fact that the student athletes should be driving the bus on this. And I get very cautious when I'm only hearing from mom, I'm only hearing from the dad, and I'll get emails from them about their son and daughter's process. And if the student isn't on it, I will include the student on that, and I'm very specific to say, Christian needs to blah, 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 blah. I would love to meet with Christian and have a conversation, and then, mom and dad, we can loop you in. But, and say to this young daughter, is this what you want? Do you really want this? Or is it, like I said, mom and dad living vicariously through their son? Is it their dream and not necessarily their child's? And then really kind of navigating and having the real conversation at A, what level of school can you be admitted to? And then B, what level, can you play at?
Yeah, I think the last part you were mentioning, I still remember when I was coaching, just getting the athletes where you could feel that their heart wasn't in going to college, and they're almost like in their brain, they've like mentally checked this off. Like my mom and dad wanted me to be a
Mm,
D1 athlete.
for
Now I
sure.
am. And then it's kind of like they've been told for the last 5, 6 years that this is what you really want, and then it's maybe
Hmm.
not, you know, and it's just
For
not,
sure.
and it's more like, okay, like that's it. Like I'm here, I'm gonna just
Correct.
do it, but they're not in it as much as their parents were over these last
For
five or
sure.
six years, right? Versus the athlete that is like, now I'm gonna make the most out of this opportunity that I really wanted. You know, I
For
think there's
sure.
just a huge difference when you
For sure.
interact
And
with
and I
the
would and
athletes
I would
more.
equate too, I think it's similar to the the pressure of college admissions, and being able to brag. My son or daughter got into these elite institutions and it's a bragging right. And also the signing days, right? They want the graphics, they want the social media posts, they want to be able to say, oh, my son or daughter is playing at whatever level, what I mean? They want the graphics.
Yeah,
And what I will often question, with our kids is, we see a trend is, everybody wants to be D1 until it's time to do the work, right? They want they want the wedding, right? They want the ceremony, they want the pictures and the party and the gifts and all this, but they don't actually want the marriage. And signing is very much the same, right? I want the celebration on social media. I want everybody to, like my posts and all these things and me to get all the gear. But then when I get there, oh my gosh, this is 10 times harder than what I actually thought it was going to be, or I committed to this school because I wanted, my senior friends to celebrate me, but I don't actually really want to go there. So it's important to, as best we can, educate and have these honest conversations and truly help them find the right fit and think about things a little bit differently than the division, the name brand, of the school and those things.
yeah, such a good point. Also, if you're not at that level where you're starting at a power four, right? Like, what's most important to you? Is it being at like a big football school and like everything that comes with that, or is it I want to play every match, game, whatever it may be? Like, what's really like the most important part of the college experience to you as well?
For sure, for sure. I know it was funny. I read in the unrelated but similar trend. I read yesterday an article that said that there are some parents that are paying like almost $10,000 for coaches for Southern uh, Greek life for
I've
like the
heard that
rush.
too, yeah.
Yeah, for the rush process, because again, they want the accolades they want. So even that's another layer of the college experience that has gotten uber competitive. And again, people are trying to live up to these, Instagram worthy, posts as opposed to let's find the right fit, let's be happy, let's enjoy our college experience and figure out how it is going to help us, when we're 40, 50, 60 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, yeah. Sometimes I don't know where all these people have the money from,
Yeah.
but
I don't.
yeah.
Not
Um,
not working in high school athletics, that's for sure.
yeah. We're already kind of in this topic, but it's probably going to be hard to pin this down. But what's the biggest change that you think you've seen in the recruiting like landscape in just the last, let's say the last 2, 3 years? You know, I know we've always talked about NIL and others, but like the last 2, 3 years even, like what's the biggest change that you've seen just
I
recruiting process and just how athletes, parents are navigating it?
Yeah, I think honestly, I think the biggest thing that's impacting in real time is just the portal. And then even like I said, like obviously in the last, month, the whole, the age, eligibility standards and the fact that those student athletes that are still on campus now have an opportunity to potentially play another year, which is bumping, offers for the class of 2027 who aren't signed yet, but maybe had been verbally committed for, in some cases, a very long time. So I think it's those things. I think it's understanding that, college recruiting has now, relied on if I need whatever it is that my team needs. If I need a quarterback, if I need, a breaststroker, if I need, a pitcher, whatever it is that my sport needs, I can go to the portal and if, the male or female is 22 years old, they've already lived away from home, they've been in a college strength conditioning program for, at least a couple years, they've handled their academics versus a 17, 18-year-old who may or may not develop. You're having to recruit mom and dad, right? You don't know if they're going to get homesick and, kind of all the things to go with that. So if I have a need, I can go to the portal and I can get one pretty easily. Even if they don't work out, I'm only tied to that person for 1 year versus the expectations on the high school side for the most part is I'm going to go to X school and I'm going to graduate from X school for 4 years. They're still hoping that that's the case. So I think it's understanding that just the nature of the portal and the impact that the high school route in many cases is going to be different than I think what they envisioned, years ago.
As a coach, I get, I'm always so torn between the, um, what you were describing at the end, where you want to give high school athletes a chance and they've worked really hard to get to where they are. But then I coach a sport like tennis where I can also just look at it and say, so and so was a senior last year. Who they played against? Here's how they've done. And I have a pretty
For
solid
sure.
idea of how they've done. I can get their transcripts. To your point, like it's much more low risk.
Right.
And but then I feel bad for like a kid that's been 17, 18 was like, I want to play at XYZ school and they're competing against that. So it's always been such a hard thing.
For
I don't
sure.
think there is a solve for it, but to your point, like being honest with the athlete and the parent that that's just the reality of life now.
Right.
But then sometimes I'm just like, man, this, you know,
Right.
boy,
Well, and
girl,
I
they've kind of worked to go to
for
their
sure.
school, whatever their school is, and then it's just not
For
the path
sure.
that's
And
there. Even though they may be good enough, it's just more of
right.
the
Well,
safety
and I
thing for
think
a coach.
and the comparison game is so alive, is so alive and well. It's the social media. It's, well, this kid is on my club team, or I played against this kid and they've got an offer from this, and why do they, blah, blah. And it's like, yes, but you don't know what the coach is looking for. You don't know, why they are a good fit for that. You know what I mean? My first question is, what do their grades look like? You know, if they're a 4.2 and you're a 3.2, that right there may be enough. You know what I mean? What are the other things they're looking for? And that's why, I say it's finding the right fit, right? You don't need hundreds of offers. You need one offer, one roster spot there where you can go in and thrive and be successful, and it is a good fit.
Yeah, makes sense. One more question just on the recruiting side, and then I got a couple more on just like youth sports in general.
Yeah.
When you talk to like families or even athletes, um, what are things that how college coaches are evaluating these athletes that when you tell it to, you mentioned maybe the grades one, you kind of led into this a little bit, but that parents and athletes are just like shocked, like they don't, that's not what they consider how an athlete looks at something. What are some of those things that you've encountered just of what parents, athletes think and then how it actually is looked at in the real world?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for sure, I think the academics, I think is number one. I mean, I think that's the easiest reason for college coaches to take you off their radar. That hey, if there's 100 kids that can do what you can do athletically, I'm going to narrow my list, down to the top 10 that I don't have to worry about in the classroom. They can handle their business because if they can handle in the classroom, they can handle the playbook, they can handle, the interviews and all the dynamics and all the other things. So I think that's number one, that the grades actually do matter. Two, because like I said, the kind of trickle down effect of playing at different levels is they also don't understand that the high grades, the high test scores, that's going to get you academic monies too, right? That's going to help your scholarship, especially when we're talking about sports that aren't full scholarships, right? Oh, hey, that's going to get my foot in the door. Or I got into XYZ school on my own. I've been given academic monies. So now when I reach out to the coach, I am way more appealing because they don't have to bend over backwards to get me admitted to the school. You know what I mean? So I think that's number one. I think two, it's the old adage, the character. I think the character and how they're carrying themselves on social media with their posting, but also the character of their families and of their parents. No one, no one wants to deal with kids and or parents that are just high maintenance, all the things, all the drama, all the time. Sports is a business. College athletics is a business. And again, if there are 10 kids that can do what you can do, and, 5 of them, kids have questionable, posts, things like that. Parents are, a lot, doing some extra things. I'm not gonna waste my time on that. I'm gonna go with the ones where these college coaches, because again, the pressure is on me to win, right? My family's livelihood is on the ability to win games, win matches, win meets, and be successful in my conference. So they're gonna take the lowest risk. The kids that are gonna check the boxes, do the things, come in, you know, and compete and handle their business.
I wrote down mine before you answered this question, and you hit the two that I had too. I think I remember one time even showing when I was done coaching, but I was helping some youth athletes here, showing them my old like contract, and I had
Hmm.
a bonus for like academics in my contract as a mid-major assistant coach. But if my team got a certain academic or a
Yeah,
certain like GPA, I was like, even if I don't care about your academics, like even if I just care about myself, this is a
right.
much better fit for me personally, as a
Correct.
coach. And then your point with the parents, I think just like vividly sitting in meetings with our head coach of just like, you know, do we want to deal with
Yes,
XYZ people for 4 years potentially, right? And
right.
every time he's not going to play, we're going to get a
Yep.
call or an email or something. And yeah, if you're a no-brainer and you're the best athlete that this school has ever had, maybe you'll deal with it,
Yes.
but
Then maybe we'll
if
be a little
you're,
bit more patient. Yeah. I mean, if you're a
yeah,
game changer, if you
yeah,
are, that stud, then yes, maybe we'll take a chance on lower academics. We'll get you the tutors. We'll do the things. If your parents are a little crazy, we'll be a little bit more patient with that. Um, but if you're, if not,
95% of people, 98% of people aren't that,
for sure.
wherever they are. Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah, I think those are,
And
I
that's where,
think
and
that,
that's where I think that, yeah, and I mean, I think that's where, like I said, going back to the right fit, and that's where I think the student athletes and the families need to take a long, hard look at what is the goal? What are you trying to accomplish through this? And what program, slash institution is going to help you achieve those goals and be, in my opinion, a better, man or woman because of these experiences 4 years later, right? What is
yeah,
going to put you in the best situation to, use your athleticism and use the experiences that you had to
yeah,
grow and develop and, be ready to, hopefully share these lessons with the next generation.
yeah, no, for sure. Got a couple more questions before we let you go. A turn. Um, you're obviously in the high school space, kind of organized high school sports. Obviously, there's this giant whole private sports landscape ecosystem that, depending on each sport, I know it looks a bit different, right? Too, of how athletes and parents are getting pulled in
Hmm.
different directions there. How do you help families like navigate that, or athletes navigate just like basically what is yeah, like pros, cons, how to navigate it
Right.
between kind of high school sports and private sports too?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's evolved obviously through the years. And I think obviously it's going to vary from, sport to sport. But I think it's being conscious that for the most part, even our most old school, hard-nosed coaches are having to bend a little bit that, if you are going to say, I'm sorry, no, you can't be a club, whatever it is, you can't be a club sport athlete during the high school season, you're going to lose those kids. So especially in our, Olympic sports. So it's, our coaches are having to work. Now, we tell our coaches their high school, if they are on one of our rosters, your high school sport is your priority. Now, should you be missing a high school game to, for a club game? No, absolutely not. But being able to say, hey, our coaches understanding that, hey, you know what, there is a big club soccer ID camp on this specific weekend. You might not want to schedule games on that day. You know what I mean? And just being watched. So it's working with the families and working with the kids and saying, like, how do we use them? Especially, we're talking, like swimmers, for example, a lot of our swimmers will swim club. Volleyball for sure. Those girls are playing club volleyball all year long. Same thing, our club soccer players. They're honestly, those are the sports that they're getting recruited from, not from our high school sports, just because of the nature of the way the seasons fall in Florida. It's primarily their club sports. So again, it's working with our coaches and having our coaches work with the families on this, but also being clear that, we absolutely want you to be on our teams. We want you to do both. But during the high school season itself, your club team is going to have to take, the back seat for that temporary period of time.
Yeah, and I know it's so different per sport too. But yeah, it's interesting to hear on the scheduling side that that's getting put into consideration. Do parents sometimes come with the belief that like the club sports is more valuable from a recruiting perspective
For
for them?
sure, for sure. Yeah, and there are some sports and some organizations, in Florida that I can speak to. Now I won't name them, that prohibit their student athletes from being on their high school teams. Whether it's saying you're not allowed to miss our practices, whether it's you're not, I mean, some, based upon the level of it, will have kids' families sign contracts that you're not allowed to play high school. Now, we've seen some that have kind of missed out on that, and some have changed their minds, even after a season of missing high school, and say, you know what? No, it's not willing, or let me go to a different club, or let me go. I do want to choose this. We have a student athlete that's joining our school this year, that would have been in that case, and the family made the decision that high school, they want the student to have the experience of the high school experience. So they have selected for the student athlete to move down in their club sport during that time period. So that way they can compete. And then once the high school season is over, would then move back up. But again, I think it's being able to just be upfront and being
Yeah.
honest that, in Florida, FHSAA is doing some things with trying to minimize the high school transfer portal. They put some restrictions in place in terms of starting this year, whatever high school you are enrolled at the first day of school, you are tied to that school for the entire school year. So even if you say play a fall sport and then decide in January, hey, I'm going to transfer to a different school, you can't go then play a spring sport for a different school. Like you're tied to the one. So hopefully, that will help. And then, like I said, I'm hoping that the club sports will kind of support the efforts and allow these kids to have the high school experience, that, the educational based athletics experience.
Yeah, I didn't even know that was a possibility before of transferring like in the middle of the school. That's yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Uh,
so we've had, yeah, Florida has had some doozies over the years. I mean, they've had kids transfer in the middle of the season, and one Friday night previously, one Friday night you're, putting on the pads for one team, and then the next Friday you're
you're
playing
playing
for a
against
different
the
team.
team.
It's been wild, but like I said, they are putting some things in place to try to
That's good.
improve that.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy to manage for coach or for
Yeah,
a
it's
school
a
or for
wild,
anybody.
wild
Yeah.
world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know Florida also has NIL in the high school space now since I think 2024. Have you guys seen a big impact on your programs there already? Is it more just
Yes and
okay?
no. There obviously are some. It's similar to the college level in the fact that, the average is a lot lower than people believe. It's not as common as people think. But FHSA also has, like, we're not allowed to talk about it. We're not allowed to get involved. I mean, our perspective with our student athletes is literally, if they sign a contract, if their family engages in these things, they have to know they've within 5 days. They've got paperwork that they need to fill out, and then we submit it to the FHSAA on behalf, that we are aware that they have a deal, but that, we can't get into the nitty gritty of it, other than to say that, we're aware and that we've made them aware that they need to do this paperwork to maintain their eligibility.
Roger. Got it. Yeah,
But
yeah,
it
that
is,
makes
but
sense. Yeah.
it is for sure. And I think what's changing is the fact that, it's becoming more common. And I think what the, so-called former street agents that are now recruiting agents slash NIL agents, they're trying to say, hey, you need to hire me. I'm your agent. I'm going to represent you for this, this, and this. You can't get a scholarship without using me. So again, it's trying to be on the front end and with our parents. And then when I'm doing my recruiting education, saying, hey, you need to be aware of this. There are things they can't do, things they can't do. The percentages that they're trying to charge these high school kids is ridiculous. The
Yeah.
average college, they're paying 2%, 3 at most. They're trying to charge high school kids, 13, 14, 15%. It's robbery, and the parents don't know what they don't know. So it's trying to have these, conversations and educate them on the front end that A, you don't need an agent, and B, if that is the route you go down, make sure you're, doing your paperwork and doing your due diligence, so that way you can stay eligible and aren't jeopardizing, your ability to play for us.
Yeah. Yeah, the agent piece. I know we work with a group that is handling some of the agent certification in Louisiana now
Hmm.
for youth, and at least there's some like minimum requirements now of like what it means to be like an agent in the high school space.
Right.
I feel like I'm not well read into it enough if it's the right restrictions and all of that, but hopefully, I know like an NFL agent can't take more than like 3%. I know they're dealing
Hmm.
with a lot different financial things as well. But yeah, if you even need an agent, but then if you do,
Right.
like, yeah,
Yeah,
the
it's wild.
percentages, and I
And
can
like I
see
said, and
why.
it's wild because like I said, and it's funny. I mean, and far too often, some of our families that I think I assume should know better, whether they were student athletes themselves or whether they have got, family ties that, or previous siblings that had been college athletes, that I'm like, why are you thinking you need an A? You know what I mean? Like of all people, like you should know better.
Yeah,
So that's been kind of like I said, so now I've had to kind of step back and say, you know what, we're just going to educate everybody on this and make sure that everybody knows. And then, I'm very careful with my personal opinion is, you don't necessarily need a recruiting service. You don't necessarily need an agent. Now, again, your family is welcome to, you make your own decisions, but just kind of making them aware of what's out there.
yeah, makes sense. Um, Last question. I know we're wrapping up here. What is maybe like one change or two changes in like the youth sports landscape you'd love to see? As an you're a parent, you're also kind of an administrator as
Mhm.
well. So, like, what are maybe like one or two things you'd like to see in the next 2, 3, 4 years? Just, yeah,
I mean, it'll never happen, but I think just the idealist in me is I just wish that people would understand like what is the purpose of youth sport? Like what is the goal? Like in my opinion, like the goal should not be to get a college scholarship, right? We should be developing, teamwork and these kids learning how tough they are and how strong they are and they can do hard things and being pushed and challenged by coaches and letting coaches, grow and develop them. I mean, and all the lessons that come from sports, that is the focus. That's why, they are doing this, not because I hope that, when I'm 18, I'm going to get a big NIL deal and a scholarship. That it's really going back to the basics of youth sport. That's, that'd be my wish. I don't know that I'll
yeah,
ever get it though.
yeah, yeah. Amen. I so vividly remember a conversation where a parent came to me and another coach, and said like, we're gonna cut our losses. The girl was like 15. We're gonna cut our losses with the sports thing. We don't think she's gonna play. And we were just like, oh my God, like A, to phrase it that way is a crazy
Oh,
thing around
absolutely.
sports for your, for your daughter, and talk about like the pressure and that conversation with her, if that's a similar conversation
For
that you're having with
sure,
her.
for
But
sure.
also just like you should not stop playing any sport at 15,
Absolutely.
even if you're miles away from any kind of college sports. Like why,
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, and just the lifelong of just, what things your body can do and the mental health. I mean, and all the things. I mean, and that's what I've told my, my own student athlete, at my own house, I don't need you to be an Olympian. I don't need you to do whatever. Like, I want a happy kid, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? That is enjoying her experience, that she's a good teammate, she's a great student,
yeah,
right? And that she is a better person because of the experiences that she's had as a student athlete. Now, does she have aspirations of competing at the next level? Of course she does.
it's great. Yeah,
But that's
for sure.
her journey, not mine.
Yeah.
And
And
I've
then
told
it's
her, I
not
said,
the end all be all. Like I remember I was maybe a little bit better of a player than my brother, but like I played Division 1. My brother ended up not playing any college sports. But now we're, in our late 30s, and he's still playing tennis and enjoying it and playing multiple times a week and like at a competitive level.
right,
And it's not like at 18 he was like, "Well, I'm not playing in college, like I'm done with the
right.
sport." And especially most of the sport, I mean, football is maybe a bit different, but a lot of these sports that you're playing in high school, you can play hopefully for a long time. And if
Absolutely.
you're not playing college sports, that shouldn't be the end of your.
For sure. For
Hopefully, you
sure.
like that sport, and it's not a sport that you're just playing just because of
Right.
that aspiration.
Right. Which I
That
think is
shouldn't
what,
be the.
which I think why at college campuses in particular, I think why there's been such a high increase on club and
Yeah,
intramural, because so many families I think are seeing that and saying, you know what, I still want to be able to play lacrosse or do whatever, swim or do whatever, play tennis and things. So I'm going to do intramurals or I'm going to go play club and still
yeah,
compete, but it's going to be at the school of my choice. So I'm not
yeah,
willing to not go to, this elite institution that I was accepted to, but I'm still going to go and compete and I'm going to still act without all the pressure and without all the business
yeah,
gunk, that comes with college athletics. And to me, it's like the best of both worlds.
yeah. Yeah, it's the pressure thing and just of play sports for the enjoyment level, and then if it ends up being and you're at a certain level, like I'm never someone that is like don't have those aspirations um or strive to go a certain direction if like that's what you want to do and you're good enough and all of that. But
Absolutely.
yeah. Last thing, as we close out here, for athletes and parents that maybe don't have a Chrissy on their campus, are there resources like you recommend, like things that, you know, everyone's trying to navigate some of this journey, but they may not have the resources that, you obviously provide at a school like yours? Like, what are some things that you'd recommend for people that are maybe listening to this to check out?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the good news is, I mean, there are organizations and then there are, professional organizations that are growing and there are, adding that. The good news is, as athletics is evolving, I think many more and more high schools in particular are adding, someone like me and adding appearances like that. Obviously, I would say start with your school counselors, your guidance counselors, and your college and career teams on your campus. From there, then I would go to, obviously there's a lot of, college and career counselors, proprietary people that are very well versed in this. And then with your high school coaches and your club coaches and navigating the process and finding people, that can help navigate this with you. There are resources out there, and really take your time. Now, my personal opinion again is, I don't know that the recruiting services are worth their um weight. So I would personally avoid those because I think those are a little bit of a slippery slope in many cases and bait and switch, and you're paying a lot of money and not getting the actual resource you need. I think there's plenty of free, good information out there of people that can help, your families navigate this and give some honest information.
Awesome. Yeah, and um, yeah, I think there's a lot of information, like you're saying, like deciphering like what's the right information, the right guidance for like you and your family is obviously really important too. Depending on the level too, I feel like I always remember like one of my good friends was like one of the best recruits. Like you don't really need help. A coach is
Yeah,
finding you versus me who is like these coaches are not knocking on my door. I might need more resources of like how do I get on a coach's radar. So I
for
think also
sure.
just figuring out like where you are on that spectrum
Absolutely.
is a big piece too,
And
right?
taking, and like I said, and that's why I would say, like, start with your coaches first. Ask them, I think I would like to play at the next level. Do you think I would have this opportunity? And if so, what level I would be at? And then not be, argumentative about that information. If they tell
Yeah.
you you're D3, you're NAIA, you're whatever, then that's probably where you are. The coaches know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
It's you can't just say, okay, everyone's saying you're D3, but I'm going to prove everybody wrong and be I'm a D1.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, maybe you're not.
Yeah.
Maybe in a couple of years after the portal you might be, but out of high school probably not. And it's
For
being
sure.
and like then taking that information and not taking offense to it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Christy, thanks so much. I know it's a lot of topics, and I feel like whenever we talk, we already talk about these, so it's good to actually like record it. We're gonna post this. We'll have your contact info too if someone ever has a question or something like that. But
Perfect.
that wraps our episode for today. If you like Bridging the Gap, feel free to subscribe on LinkedIn. If you're listening to this on the podcast app of your choice, you probably already know where to find us, but give it a like and a review. And then, yeah, Kristy, again, thanks so much for your time. I know this is busy with coming back to school and everything like that, so we really appreciate it. Thanks for being on, and have a great week, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Christian.